Hey everyone, welcome to the latest, the greatest Octatrack video. So, today I got really excited and was preparing for a show that I'm doing in January for a friend of mine, RFX1. He's a really talented artist. He's doing a art gallery thing with a bunch of artists from Long Beach. He asked me to do something kind of experimental with it, and I was like, yes, I would really love to do that. So I put together this kind of instrumental Octatrack game for myself to play in January, and I wanted to share that with you. It'll probably change between now and January, although I've made a lot of headway in a very short time, and I probably will just put it on the back burner to finish some other things. So by January, it'll more or less be kind of like this. So I think the easiest way to describe this set is to start with the individual tracks. So we're just going to start with my track 4, which is the kick. It's kind of a nice hearty kick. I'm not going to go into the details of how I made this kick because there's like a whole other world of things going on here. But the main point is that there's a kick going. There's a very set pattern that I have going on here. It's on a slight swing, just to give it some soul. And then we've got this trig condition telling this one to play every 3 out of 4. So just kind of a little bit of variance so you don't get too tired of it. And I have this track for my hi-hats and any other rhythms that I might want to incorporate. We're going to keep it simple. This is my bass. I've been playing with scale a little bit more. So in this particular set, I don't know if I actually went over this before, but I kind of found this really cool way to play music that sounds kind of like the field, if anybody's familiar with the field. But luckily for you, I will be sharing those details in this video. So when you think about things like the field or who else? Mostly the field. Everything's kind of on a slower metric, so you don't get a lot of like 16th note rhythms unless he's doing some sort of like drum and bass kind of build or something like that. So the main parts of it are kind of like 8th notes and quarter notes rather than 16th notes. So I kind of like divided my meter that way. So I'm just going to do like a quarter note here. So this lets me kind of figure out what sample I'm playing and then choose the root of that sample and be like, okay, I want this to be reinforced. Which is like, it's not C, so it would be like A flat. This track is for sampling, and then I'm going to go to this set over here. So 7 is my synth. It's being fed into Empress Reverb. You can hear that it's doing some fake sidechain, and I do that by way of this LFO, which is set to refresh every quarter note, or whatever the rhythm is. But these 2 tracks are by far the most exciting part of my set. So essentially what I did was I took 2 static machines, and then this is important because I needed long files. So I've been trying to find ways to use all these files that I use for my performance. Normally I sing to them and I just kind of play them, but I also really like doing kind of experimental stuff. So I was trying to figure out like what's an easy way to take a lot of these instrumentals and get some mileage out of them in like an experimental context. And so I sort of devised this field-esque style of playing in which I don't actually slice the sample, so the whole thing is just kind of left intact. And instead of choosing to select the start point by the slice, I select it by just wherever the number lands in relation to I think essentially what this is doing is dividing the track into 128 slices, and then it picks one of these. So I have it set to that, and I also have it set to ping pong, because that lets me set this to 1. So I'm just going to demonstrate this. Say I have this at 1, and I think the beginning of the song. Cool. And I have this slowed down on purpose just because it sounds more interesting. So since the track is so long, the relative length here is still pretty long. So you've noticed that it kind of went this far before it started playing backwards. So I kind of just have that as a safeguard against if I end up accidentally making silence. But most of the time that shouldn't happen because I have it set to repeat this many times. And so when I play it like this, and this also has a sidechain on it here, or fake sidechain. It's basically just volume LFOing up on a saw. Okay, so this is actually my song, Feeling Today, which I'll also link in the comments. And so basically what I'm asking this thing to do is play these samples in a small... So now I know 11 is, let's just make a new scene here. I know 11 is the pitched down part, so I can set this to 0. And that's not perfect, of course, but once you add a kick, doesn't really matter because it feels like the rhythm is just being sucked into the kick anyway. And that was kind of the revelation for this particular project. I kind of was like, okay, I can use this to easily create some kind of interesting slices out of my old tracks. As long as I just slow it down. I mean, like... it creates all kinds of cool rhythms. And the key also was that this is the instrumental minus the beat, so that I could keep the beat focused on these two. But now that I say that, I actually created a second track, which is a collection of all of my beat sections from those tracks. And they're not in the same order. I didn't really pay attention to what order I put them in. But what's cool about this is that I can do the same thing, and I'm going to mute the other one for now. That's basically what these two tracks are doing. Track 5 is the melodic version of track 6, and they're both just taking old instrumentals and stems from my other projects, and then kind of using small slices of them and taking advantage of the fact that I went through all the work to sync these things one by one, so that they all fit within this kind of new framework. And the other thing that I should add is that in this particular case, I used an LFO in the second LFO, and I haven't activated it yet. But essentially what it does is it turns the value of the start point into a square wave, which selects between two different values. And what I really liked about that, and the reason why the length of this pattern is so long, is because I wanted half of this pattern, which I believe is 128 steps. I wanted it to be 8 bars long, and for each 4-bar section to have its own personality. It just seemed like too much work to have to switch those manually myself. So if I was like playing along, and the other thing that I don't like about it is that if I liked the old one, I would have to be like, oh shit, what number was that? Is it 55, 54? And then each time I would have to scroll to that little number. So instead of doing that, I was like, why don't I create a little square wave which jumps between one value here and one value here. And I had to make it trig sync trig, so it would restart at the beginning. I had to make it this long so that it could fit 8 bars of music within this single page. It didn't actually have to do it within a page, but it helped to be able to see the whole thing. You'll see it switch here. Isn't that much more interesting? I could even switch this one. But I'm probably doing other stuff like this. And then once I figured out that the key is probably C sharp. Yeah. And then if I reset this scene and then set this. Other things that should be mentioned. The basis of the set is this. I just kind of switch between different start points. When I switch the start point, it creates another pair that it alternates between. And all that matters is that it feels different, right? You can hypnotize anybody with that. So then I realized that there are certain things that I still need. I'm like, okay, so if I go to one of those shows, I don't get tired of it. And there are certain things that keep me from that. I think it's not just doing the kick the whole time. And so, you know, hopefully this thing evolves over time, but the main thing that I needed to do was remove the kick and remove that side chain so that we really feel the whole thing open up. And instead of having another pattern do that, which is messy to me because you could have accidental patterns left over from improvisations in the past, and then it's just like annoying to stumble upon that when you think you're supposed to like be clearing the energy a little bit. So I figured easiest way is to mute the kick, sort of map all of these fake gain sweeps that are basically sidechained to make them go away, including on my playback through machine for my OP1, so that I can be performing something like, and let's make sure the tempo is the same, yep. Yeah, so for the most part that worked. It's a little wonky what happened, but generally you get the idea. The sidechain lifts, and you kind of have a moment where you can take a breather, maybe play some ambient sounds. Oh, I see what's happening. The C is not mapped here. Yeah. Yeah, so that is the general overview of all of those tracks. I did skip one track though, and this is the most recent development. I kind of discovered this right before I made this video, but wanted to share it because it's pretty powerful too. So say I create some sort of pattern. So we're gonna mute the melodic one, knowing that this might be in the wrong key. It's also, the other big reference is Andy Stott, by the way, and I should have really mentioned him earlier because he has a new album and it's amazing and you should check it out. It's called, I think it's called It Should Be Yes. Yes, it is. Definitely check that album out, and this is hugely referenced by that plus the field. I should also mention I have an analog heat off camera that's making this whole thing sound a little bit crunchier. Right, so say I have this pattern, and I'm just, basically this is my sampling track before I get into it. But all I'd want to do is take just recording this. Right. So initially my idea that I was telling you about over here, which was about sort of ping pong delays, or not ping pong delays, but ping pong sample playback, where it'll play backwards, it was really based on a use of smaller samples. When I first discovered it, I applied it to something like this, in which I had sampled a 2-bar phrase, or in this case a 4-bar phrase. I'm just going to cut that into 16. And once I had done that, I could set up a ping pong on that. And then if I set this to slices, and then I set slices to on, right. So I discovered that a few weeks ago and I didn't really use it. Got distracted, played a bunch of shows, and now I'm back. And even though I use the stems in this particular way, the ping pong thing doesn't really happen as much because my samples are pretty evenly spaced out, my playback is, so it doesn't actually hit the ping pong. On this particular case though, since the file is smaller, only like 64 steps, I can slice that into 1, 2, 3, 4. It's only like And so this is kind of a fun way to take some melodic elements that I've been playing with and then build them back into the set without disrupting the flow of creativity. So if I'm kind of playing around with, and I'm going to just remove that for now. So say I'm like working over here and I set up I've also been listening to Randomer, also a great techno DJ. Everyone should check him out. There's going to be a lot of links at the end of this one. Okay, so I have this rhythm here. And then maybe I do some sort of like a... Now I have a bank of these. Oh yeah, these are also halftime. And this page, a lot easier to remember which numbers they are. So essentially while I'm playing this, I would switch beats and see where I can find another. Yeah, and this thing is a lot of fun to play with because it's much more tactile. It's very forgiving because there's a sidechain to it. I found that sidechain is a great way, and I keep calling it sidechain, but again, it's not. It's just about volume. Sidechain's really helpful to make the track glue together. So any kinds of melodic things that don't have any rhythm to them, that have ping pong on them, suddenly become these kind of ambient sources of sound. And then once you wrap them up in a beat, which again, you don't actually have to. I should also mention that this, maybe I did already, but the scene cuts out all the side chains, so now I have, yeah, I did mention that. So the only thing about having a beat, because this, I kind of immediately gravitated towards this when I was asked to do an experimental set. I could have gone a lot more ambient with it, but I don't really listen to just ambient music that doesn't have a ton of rhythm in it. So this was, I feel like honestly with a beat is easier to do. Because you can kind of hide behind that in case there's some weird rhythmic things going on. If you repeat it enough, it becomes right. like these little pops that are going on, I feel more okay with them when there's like a So yeah, this is the whole set. I really like it because I don't have to switch patterns anymore. I can just kind of design different parts. And I did kind of go into this with the last video, which was kind of about my turning Tolliver's set into something that was playable, that didn't take up too much space as far as patterns and parts that I'd have to memorize. So yeah, like this is definitely an extension of that. I still have yet to see what I can do with the scenes because I think it serves a very key purpose right now. And it's a bit intimidating to think about using these scenes for anything beyond just kind of releasing, like mixing essentially. Just because I don't want to get too bogged down in what the settings on these tracks are here, because that's where things get confusing, and there's already a lot of variables in the form of just like playing these tracks and then being like, okay, I don't want to use this sample anymore. I'm gonna go in here and switch. So that's where most of my my bandwidth is being placed, my mental CPU, as I mentioned before. So yeah, I would love to hear what you think of this setup. I'll probably just record a video of it later on. That's just like a jam after I've practiced it a little bit, just to get some more feedback. But for the time being, let me know if you have any other ideas on things that I could try. A lot of the stuff that I'm talking about now, you can kind of see the development in the last few weeks, or the last few videos actually, where I talk about wanting to create some kind of variance in pattern over like a larger scale, like 8 bars and things like that. So if you're excited about these kinds of ideas, just check out the last few videos, and I talk about little pieces that have kind of formed this set. Anyway, till next time.